before I continue, I want to thank everybody who participated on Thursday's sing-along. We did hit our mark of 101 people, and that includes a handful online and the rest in person, so we did great. So thanks to that little seed that was planted 3 years ago. So that was a third annual, 101. So that was pretty amazing. And we even had one person volunteer to lead us in one of the songs who was not part of the planning committee or anything. So they asked for a volunteer, and he raised his hand and came up and led us in song. So I told him, I hope you know that this means you volunteered yourself for next year. And then Debbie from the pantry said, oh, he's one of our volunteers. I said, well, now I know how to find you. So we might have another singer next year. Peace. It's an expression we long for in our hearts, homes, and the world. But what does it mean to profess peace? And more importantly, how do we live it? Luke's gospel provides two striking images. The angels at Jesus' birth announcing peace to all on whom divine favor rests, and Jesus sending the disciples into the world to carry a message of peace. Both remind us that peace is not just an idea or a feeling. It is a calling, a way of life that embraces all of humanity, regardless of how they name or understand the divine. There's an ideal that if we don't call God by God, or Lord, or Father, you must not believe in God. You must believe in something else. So, at times when we hear God referred to by another name, the average person is in shock or disbelief or just looks at that person differently. Now, I will tell you that a few months ago, maybe even more than a few months ago, I sent out an email and I used different words for God outside of what you're accustomed to. And I received a couple of feedback, not necessarily negative, but just kind of like, Those were different. And there was a purpose to that. With so much division in this world, particularly in our country, we need to realize that even if someone does not address God by the word that you address God by the image that you address God by, they are addressing God. It's another reason why, as we became open and affirming, if you notice, there's a little note on the Lord's Prayer where it says you pray whatever version you want. Some would prefer to say Our Mother. Why? Because they've had bad relationships with the male figures in their lives. Whether it's been abuse, assault, whatever it is. And they may not want to see God as male. And ultimately, I'll remind you that God is even a burning bush. So, God could be anything that you imagine. God doesn't come in one form or another. Yahweh is also a voice from the clouds, from the heavens, with no body, no face. Do what you will with that. But allow it to sit there and simmer low if you haven't thought about it before. And it's particularly special during Advent to reflect on that. In Luke 2, the angels sing a song of peace, declaring the glory and goodwill towards humanity. It's a beautiful image, yet it comes during deep division and hardship. See, it seems like, excuse me, it seems like we still don't get the message. Because even in this time when the Bible was written, and I'll remind you once again for those who are unaware, which I'm sure you all are aware, there was no court reporter there taking notes. What did you say, Jesus? Can you repeat that one more time? There was no stenographer in there. There was no Laura or Judy or Holly taking minutes. It was just stories passed generation after generation. But you see, part of these stories were written also because of what was happening in society at that time. And just like we read, there was division then and there's division now. Think of all the decades that you've experienced. Has there been a decade where there was no division? What did that division look like? The people of Israel were under Roman rule, longing for liberation. The angel's message wasn't a political revolution, but peace. Think about it. Jesus spoke out against the status quo, but it was not about necessarily dividing or causing war. It was about saying, you need to do better for all of God's children. How many people don't we have out there that claim to be leaders, but continue to engrave and instill division and hate and phobias? That is not planting peace. That is far from peace. Think of what's happening in our world right now. Think of what's happening with the three countries that are supposed to be in a pact together. The division that is now happening. See, being insulted that you were compared to another country is kind of stupid. Instead, you should say, hey, you shouldn't be name calling us. We should be working together. Instead of causing more hatred. Oh, we're nothing like that country. And what happens? Peace becomes further and further away. Think of moments in this congregation where there has been division. Not since I've started, I've heard of a few here and there, which is no different from any other congregation. Why? Because when we come together in a church community, it's a system of family dynamics. Just like in your family, you may have division, you may have arguments, but ultimately our goal as a church community is to be what? Community, to be in peace with each other. See, that's kind of the feeling we should feel sometimes. You didn't realize he was part of the sermon today. Our nation, as I've said, is politically, socially, and theologically in an intense and tragic division. And what gets to me is that you can't support this because if you do, you must be against this. And if you support this, you must be against this. There's no coming to seeing in between or understanding both perspectives. It does not matter what side you are taking. There are extremists on either side. It is those extremists that make it more difficult for us to come to the table to focus on peace. I've shared to you before how when I started at the first seminary, and I won't say it out loud since we're live streaming, where I started the first seminary, why I left after my first year. Because I felt that if I wasn't far this way, I wasn't with them. I wasn't being allowed to grow in my own terms. And that's why I went to where I graduated from. that space allowed me to grow, allowed me to understand where I needed to undo some of what I had embedded in me. So when I tell you that the changes we made here theologically, it's not something I expect you to do overnight. I honestly mean it. Now, I might get a little frustrated if it's like 4 years down the road and you still kind of still in step one. But the idea is for you to grow and be in peace as you grow. The goal is to grow. It's those extremists that make it hard for us to come to this table and see each other in the divine image of God. It's those extremists that sometimes prevent us from having peace. It's a constant taunting and poking fun at each other versus recognizing and honoring our differences while also acknowledging our similarities. We all want to survive and live in peace. How many of you want to survive? Raise your hand. How many of you want peace? Not everybody wants peace. Okay, then. See, but if we were to take a poll, which we're not going to, and say, okay, who did you vote for? I can guarantee you, it's not going to be 100% of the same. But if you saw the hands being raised, we all had our hands raised. And ultimately, when it comes to it, that's what we should be focused on. That peace, the angels proclaim, starts with glorifying the divine, not glorifying a mere human. Glorifying the divine is not oppressing. It is not reducing or removing equal rights that each person in this nation should have. Glorifying the divine is not demeaning the trans kid, the undocumented immigrant, or the documented immigrant. When we focus on goodness and align our lives with higher purposes, we can experience peace that transcends circumstances. In our modern world, where division often feels louder than harmony, the angel's song calls us back to the truth. True peace comes from placing the divine at the center, allowing love to shape how we see the world and one another. Think of this as when you go to a restaurant and the food is superb, you're not about to write a complaint. More likely you'll share, and Elaine will go over to Holly and say, oh, Holly, you've got to try this restaurant. And Holly's like, which one? And she'll pick up Linda and say, let's go eat. Or maybe Linda will pick her up. Both of them don't get in their way when they're in the parking lot. That's all I'm saying. Because both of them are the same in that sense. I've seen you. But if Elaine would have had a bad experience, she might share that, but she might also go on their webpage or what have you and say the service was terrible, the food was just cold, we were overcharged, Bud didn't like it and he walked out and made me pay for everything. So you get that idea where what happens. And it's the same thing here in our lives. We get loud about where we don't agree, but we forget to acknowledge where we do agree. One of the biggest ones for me, even in this congregation, and I've grown with it more and more because we have a few retirees that are former police officers, is the idea that if you support police officers, you must be against Black Lives Matter. And I understand the sentiment. Or if you support Black Lives Matter, you must be against supporting law enforcement. But you see, just like any group, we have some who are going to go a little too far. And it's not about being neutral, it's about recognizing the individual. In Luke 10, Jesus sends the disciples into the world, instructing them to bring peace wherever they go. They aren't promised an easy road. Instead, they are reminded that peace is a gift to offer, even if it isn't always accepted. I stumbled there because thought came into my mind, picturing my dad when I would get into arguments with my sister or whoever. He says, well, you know, Jesus would tell you to forgive and forget. I was like, I don't know about that. I struggled with that. I said, well, maybe forgive, but forget, let's face it, we're all old elephants. We don't forget. At least most of us don't, right? But in seminary, I also learned that forgiveness is good, but forgiveness, the majority of the time, is for the person who was hurt. So if I didn't want to forgive you, it's that peace is for me, not for you. Because there's been times where what happens when someone is dying and they've been cruel to you most of your life, and they reach out and they say, Jen, I want to see you before I die. And Jen's like, why now? I want to die in peace. Now, you would question, well, as a Christian, am I obligated to give them that peace? Well, that's something between you and God. Because if you do not feel compelled to do that, then you don't have to. Because at the end, it's being selfish for that person because they're ready to leave. So they want to wrap it all nice and tight with a little bow on there when they have how much time. I've shared with a few of you that when I pass, I want to be cremated because I don't want our son to feel obligated to go visit a piece of land that I'm not there. It's just my body. That's completely different from my parents, especially my dad, who would visit his parents and in-laws' burial sites regularly. And for me, it goes back to the same message that while he did that, he and my mom also taught us, why come to my funeral if you were never present in my life? Why bring me flowers when I'm dead when you didn't bring them to me while I was alive? So we're supposed to seek peace throughout our lives, not just at one certain point. Advent is not the only time that we should be seeking peace. It should be year-round. Peace looks like two people who uniquely find themselves as friends, one Christian and one Jewish. Their ears might start burning because I'm talking about them without talking about them. And I'm sure some of you know who I'm referring to. They come together not despite their differences in faith, but because of their shared journey of community and seeking peace in their lives. They come together to create community. Now, what does that living peace look like today? Consider another story of a Muslim woman and a Jewish man in a major U.S. city, or even a smaller town, who began a community garden together. They initially worked side by side in silence, unsure of each other. But over time, they started sharing stories swapping recipes and celebrating holidays together. Their small act of living peace bridged divides of faith, culture, and history. Jesus' instructions to the disciples reminds us that peace is not conditional on agreement or sameness. Live at peace means spreading love to all of humanity, those who believe in the same divine being, those who believe in a different one, and those who do not believe. Or the nuns, and not as a nun with Catholic white and black outfits. Nuns as in they have no religion, no faith practice they belong to. It means recognizing the sacred worth of every human being, whether they call it divine by the name that we know or not. Today, we are both recipients and messengers of peace. The angel song is for us, a reminder that peace has come into the world. It's similar to last week's holiday community sing-along, where various people of Christian and non-Christian faith came together to enjoy fellowship, music, and fun. We came, we sang, we ate, and we were merry. We even had a Hanukkah hymn. Ruth sang in German. Pastor sang in Congolese, right? And one attended, as I said, volunteered to sing. We even hit, as I said, our goal, or should I say more of my goal, of 100 people. Our first year was 50, last year was 75, and this year it was 101. We can only hope and pray we continue to grow. But you see, that came from a little seed. I won't say her name again because she'll probably throw a shoe at me because she doesn't like when I recognize her as being the one to birth that. But you see, it's important to recognize that because it was a little seed. And now, those of you who were here Thursday, those of you who heard about it, you've seen how it's become a joy for people to attend. Some people said, I was not in the spirit. I couldn't feel it this year, and this helped. I'm one of those who are struggling. And you know this, I've shared this. The holidays are rather hard for me. But my job entails that I'm supposed to be happy. But someone always reminds me, and not my husband, you're human. We know you experience life too. And maybe those aren't their exact words, but similar. See, we all had fun and we enjoyed each other. We remember, like the disciples, we are called to continue to carry that peace into a restless and often divided world. The sing-along was not about division. It was about community and a core word within that word, unity. We can think about it as come in unity. Have you thought about that before? Unity. Come in unity. Live in peace means advocating for the marginalized. It means breaking bread with neighbors of different faith, classes, ethnicities, cultures, listening to the story of those who don't see the world as we do, and seeking common ground. Live in peace also means engaging in the hard work of justice. I don't care what aspect you say you side on when it comes to Israel and Gaza. You have to see the humanity of all involved, even those pressing the red button to throw more weapons of war. Or the I can't speak today. Russian and Ukraine war. Are you seeing the humanity? Or are you continuing that rhetoric that they're animals or less of? And people often equate Palestinians with being Muslim and being less up because they're not Christian and they're not Jewish. But there's a big percentage of Palestinians who are Christian, who even as they took shelter in a Christian church, were bombed. Imagine, like the boys, what it would be like to see them without shelter, without food, suffering. Your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, your godchildren. That is not living in peace. And while we may have some peace in our lives here in the safety of our own community, we cannot forget the rest of the world. Because, I'll repeat it again, live in peace also means engaging in the hard work of justice. Does that mean getting a megaphone and hitting the streets? Not necessarily. It could mean something of speaking out when you hear someone spill some xenophobia or phobia of some sort. Says that's not right. When we stand against racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, discrimination, and hatred in all its forms, we reflect a heart for a world where every person is valued. When we advocate for the needy, the elderly, the veteran in need of services, the refugees, the outcasts, this includes undocumented immigrants, trans kids, and the freedom to read any book, we embody the peace that offers support to all people, no matter where they come from or how they pray. This Advent season, let us proclaim peace like the angels and live peace like the disciples. Let us celebrate God in all we do and embrace the peace of God that brings into our lives. And let us share that peace with a world longing for hope, crossing boundaries of faith, culture, and understanding to reflect God's inclusive love. Where have you read or heard that God has stipulations to God's love? Because maybe I've missed that. And I know sometimes it's hard to love the other person. How many of us haven't been there? We've all been there at one point or another. And it's hard. But at the end of the day, we have to recognize that person is still also a child of God. Even those who spill that hateful rhetoric that we hear. The peace we offer may not always be received. But as Jesus reminds us, it will never be wasted. It is a gift we can carry forward, one act of love and understanding at a time. As you go into the world this week and you proclaim peace, live peace, and trust that whatever it is that is received, the kingdom of God is there. Peace to this house. Amen.